中文不太好，所以今天我说英文，不好意思。So my name is Mark Andrews. I have been test driving cars in China since 2007. I'm no longer based in China. This is why I am joining you via link. So I left in 2023. I'm the author of the book Driving the Dragon, which I will just put. So this is the book that I've written, which will be appearing next month. And it's talking about the rise of the Chinese car industry through my experience of test driving cars in China. And what I would like to talk about today is some of my experiences with testing the self-driving features of cars in China. Now, probably where things I think really started happening was 2021. Up until that point, I had tested some cars which had had some form of self-driving, but it was usually some form of ACC. Then in 2020, XPeng launched the P7. But what was happening very much at that time was that none of the cars would actually come equipped initially with the self-driving features. And so I had to wait until 2021 with the P7 to test NGP. And at that time, I got to drive it in Guangzhou, and I did the same route using a Tesla Model 3. And of course, Tesla, there's always been a problem in China in that while Tesla has FSD in the US, that has not been available in China. It is perhaps going to be available later this year in China, although interestingly, Tesla is no longer referring to it as FSD in the China market now. So quite what will be available, it's difficult to say. What I discovered when test driving the XPeng P7 against the Model 3 is that both systems had advantages in certain aspects. Which was better overall is difficult to say. I later in 2021 also got to take part in the NGP challenge of XPeng, where they drove the cars from Guangzhou to Beijing. And during that trip, I did some inner city driving. So at that time, the NGP system could do a little bit of inner city driving if it was a protected road like a Gaojia. So I was driving one of those roads in Nanjing, and it was able to drive that kind of road. Invited by it to then try their parking function. This really was just a memory parking system where you taught the car a route to a specific parking space, you drove it, it memorized it, and then it could at a later time repeat that journey. So in 2021, XPeng introduced the world's first mass-produced car with LiDAR, the P5. And all our features will be working on the P5 and will be able to do many things. This didn't happen. I, in fact, actually never test drove the P5 with its self-driving features available. My next real experience, again, was with XPeng, and this was using the XNGP system with the P7i in Shanghai. I was actually quite impressed by its performance. So this was the time when XPeng started to offer inner city driving using LiDAR-based system. And it worked quite well in Shanghai on various roads with few cutoffs. I, at the time, decided to do an article for Wired magazine, and it was looking at the self-driving features of the 3 US listed Chinese startups. So Li Auto, NIO, and XPeng. So over the course of around 3 months, I test drove all cars from all 3 producers. Whilst all 3 cars had LiDAR, the only one that was actually really able to do inner city driving at that stage was XPeng. The systems by Li Auto and NIO were rather restricted just to the highways, and I actually found that the NIO system did not work particularly well. The Li Auto system did work quite well on the highway, but much better. Perhaps not quite as well as the NIO system. I then drove the XPeng G6 in Guangzhou and found the XNGP system to actually work not very well in Guangzhou, which was quite a surprise because I had been quite impressed by it in Shanghai. And I think the issue with China is that the driving conditions between different cities vary quite considerably. And where I think the system was struggling was that in Shanghai, you have quite protected roads for two-wheel traffic, so bicycles, electric bikes, etc. And these are separated by and large from car traffic. With Guangzhou, it is more mixed. There isn't such a separation between two-wheel traffic and four-wheel traffic. And I think, therefore, this really caused a strain for the system. I actually left China in 2023, but I returned for a few months last year, and I got to test the new XPeng system, which is based on their, what they were calling at the time, the AI Hawkeye visual solution. So XPeng had gone full circle and had abandoned LiDAR, although they were the first company to introduce it on their cars, and are now using a visual Tesla-like system to just do the self-driving. I didn't do that fuller test in Guangzhou with that, but I did, in relatively mild traffic, see that it would work. I don't quite know what it would be like in heavier traffic because I didn't have the opportunity to test it in that. One thing I have noticed, and I think the one of the previous speakers was talking about, is there is an issue with chips. Now, it seems to me that most of the self-driving features in China are rather dependent on the NVIDIA chips, particularly the Orin X, but now the 4 chip is coming in as well. And this always seemed to me to be a potential problem for Chinese producers. Now, it looks like in 2025, that is finally going to be solved. So with NIO, they're introducing the Shenji NX 9031 chip in their ET rather, sorry, ET9. And XPeng will be introducing the Turing AI chip as well. So hopefully now, with Chinese producers producing their own chips, this will have a number of advantages. Firstly, there won't be any potential problems due to trade tariffs, etc., which are becoming more of a problem with the Trump administration. But Equally, this will give not only more control with supply to the Chinese manufacturers, but more control over what the abilities of the chips are, the speed, and also it should help reduce cost as well. And this also links into BYD. BYD have recently made a major announcement with their God's Eye system. So BYD are essentially democratizing the self-driving area in China. So all BYD cars will have some form of self-driving ability, depending on what the model is. And as a result, I think all manufacturers who want to be taken seriously in the Chinese market are going to have to replicate this move. Already we are seeing some moves from Chery and I think Geely to try to match BYD in this aspect. And so 2025, I think, is a very important year going forward for this area in China. You've got the appearance of Chinese chips, and you also have got these features appearing on much cheaper car models. One thing that was announced, I think it was late last year, DJI announced that they were able to do urban smart driving using a chip with 32 TOPS. 32 TOPS. This is much lower than previous systems. Most systems use at least one NVIDIA or an X chip, which has 254 TOPS. And most, in fact, use two of the chips. And in the case of a lot of the Neo cars, they're using the Super Atom computer, which uses 4 Orin X chips. So that's over 1,000 TOPS. So if DJI really can do this in and mass produce these chips and introduce them, this will be a big game changer for the Chinese situation. I believe this conference is also talking about not only AI and self-driving cars, but also features such as self-driving aircraft and boats. Well, I think this technology is very, very crucial when it comes to eVTOL aircraft. So electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, which a number of producers are looking to try and start mass producing. And this kind of technology will be very, very important when it comes to the mass production of those and the introduction of them, because obviously it can be quite dangerous for people who are unfamiliar with flying to be flying these aircraft around. So it'll be very dependent on AI and very dependent on these systems. So going forward, I think China is in really quite a good place for being able to use these systems and put them into products that everyday people can use. Thank you very much for your time and for listening to my speech. Hopefully this was of some use to you.
Marcus, thanks for your